Paymon who?
Mata Heyday.
Paymon Lata Heyday. Who is he?
Never paid taxes in 30 years. Fought the U.S. tax court and won.
See, I believe our rights come from God, not from government.
Welcome, my friends, to another edition of Freedom Law School's Freedom Hour. This is Paymon Lata, the president of Freedom Law School at freedomlawschool.org. And in this interview tonight, I'm bringing back for you again Mr. Joseph Banister, former gun-carrying IRS special agent who defected from the IRS to the freedom movement, defected from lies and corruption to the truth and freedom, and been exposing that income tax is a fraud now for over 25 years now. This is third series in a series of 3 videos. If you have not seen the first 2 videos, the link is below in the description. You probably want to watch those first, but this is the most climactic part of the 3 series. Because Joe coming out, exposing the IRS lies, the Deep State Department of Injustice, DOJ lies, refusal to engage and converse peacefully with the American people, and simply show us their authority to tax the labor of the American people. Instead, they want to just hit you over the head, punch you, shut you up. Well, that's what they did with Joe Banister. They could not stand that one of their own is exposing the fraud of the income tax. So I'm going to bring Joe on and let him tell you about how was it that they came after Joe Banister to try to shut him up. Joe, welcome to our Freedom Hour. How are you today, my friend?
Thanks for having me again.
It's my pleasure. So, Joe, tell us what happened in 2004 with the IRS sending you after all these years. From 99, you quit the IRS, exposed them in the early 2000 years with the We the People Foundation, the debates that the government never shows up. You know, they agree to show up, and then before 9/11, then because of 9/11, they just get out of their agreement they made. They use it as an excuse to not to meet with you and others in the freedom movement to tell the truth to the American people and debate it. And then you had all USA Today ads that We the People Foundation featured you and others about income tax fraud. What happened in 2004, Joe?
Well, maybe I'll back up just a little bit because, you know, as you mentioned, there was the USA Today ads, and we together, and you were part of the effort, making waves back in D.C. that, you know, there was actually a large group of Americans who had some real questions about the, you know, scope and nature of the federal income tax. And in 2001, I was actually interviewed by the New York Times, and I was on 60 Minutes. And I learned the hard way that the mainstream media, when they really start paying attention to you, they may have other agendas other than actually getting to the truth. And so I found out they basically wanted, you know, the public to know all about me, because the media probably learned before I did that I was under criminal investigation starting in 2001. And that investigation lasted about 3 years. And then in November of 2004, I was indicted with 4 felony counts. And so, you know, there was a lot going on between 2001 and 2004. But, you know, of course, things are going on ever since I resigned in 1999, and prior to that with the efforts that, you know, you were already making. But yeah, in November 2004, I was actually indicted. You know, the same agency that I used to work for and work with saw to it that I was indicted by a grand jury in Sacramento, California. And my client was also indicted. And a little background on what the government claimed. Back in 1999, 2000, a gentleman named Al Thompson approached me to, actually, Al was one of the people that was featured in those USA Today ads. But he approached me and he said, look, I've paid the income tax all my life, and I would like to see if I can get some of my money back. And so I'd like to, sue to get a refund. And I'd like you to help me because you, Joe, are a CPA and you know how the rules work, and I want to follow the rules, is what Al told me. And so I thought very naively, not the first naive choice I ever made. I said, well, Al, I'm a CPA. I know how to read the rules and certainly want to obey the rules. If you want to seek a refund of income taxes you already paid, let's go through the process and do it. And so we began the process. The first step is to amend tax returns that you had filed in the past. And I'll just say right now, if I don't get a chance again, this is not a pathway I would recommend, especially since, you'll see how they hammered me for no good reason. But anyway, the first step is to prepare amended tax returns that amend or put something down different than what was on the original tax return. And you're supposed to put down what you believe to be the truth, which I, as the preparer of the tax returns, did. So there were 3 years that we amended because we still had an opportunity to amend those particular 3 most recent years. And of course, Al Thompson's position was that he did not owe the income tax at all. And so therefore he wanted all of the money back that he had paid in during those previous 3 years. So I prepared tax returns on his behalf as a CPA. I signed those tax returns as a preparer. He signed the tax returns as the filer of the tax returns. And we submitted them. And again, my naivete was, well, I'm following the rules. We will go through the process of requesting a refund of Al Thompson's income taxes. And if the IRS says yes, well, then he's going to get all his money back. If the IRS says no, then we will appeal and we will just go through the process. Well, what happened was, this would happen in about 2001 or so, same time when I was on 60 Minutes. And so the IRS and the Department of Justice decided to turn those lawful, follow the rules, amended tax returns and request for a refund into a fraudulent refund claim. And so when I was indicted in November 2004, 3 of the 4 felony counts that I was indicted on were that I prepared, as a CPA, 3 false federal income tax returns for Al Thompson. And then the 4th felony was that I conspired with Al Thompson to defraud the United States of America. So those 4 felony counts I was probably looking at somewhere, or at least 5 to 7 years in federal prison. And so November 2004 is when I was indicted. And now Al Thompson, he decided, and, I don't want to sound like I'm casting aspersions. We did things very differently. Al did not want to hire an attorney because he believed that hiring an attorney would give the court jurisdiction over him. And because Al would not hire an attorney, and I did hire a couple attorneys, Robert Bernhoft and Jeffrey Dickstein, we couldn't do a joint defense where we both stick together. We're both being, accused of these crimes. Let's stick together and defend them. And because Al Thompson refused to get an attorney to represent him, we couldn't have a joint defense. The other thing was that Al wanted to exercise his speedy trial rights, which you probably talked about on your show before, but I believe it's 70 days or so that the government is required to bring you to trial if you indeed want to exercise those speedy trial rights. I didn't want a speedy trial. I wanted as much time to prepare as possible. So Al and I were indicted in November 2004, and Al's trial was in January of 2005, like approximately 60 days or so after the indictment. And Al represented himself. He had standby counsel, as they call it. And again, you've probably described that on your show before. But he had assistance of a lawyer, but Al represented himself. And, it was Jeff Dickstein, my attorney, and myself. We watched the trial. And it was, again, nothing against Al, but it was a train wreck. And, the other thing I didn't mention is that on the day we were indicted, Al Thompson and myself were both arrested. And Al Thompson fled. He was arrested up in Redding, California, and I in San Jose, California. And Al fled the arresting agents. He, rushed out in his car and drove out on the freeway, and the California Highway Patrol had to stop him, like a felony car stop kind of a thing. And, the car stop made the 5 o'clock news. And whereas myself, I just, gave up peacefully. And I was out on bail within 3 or 4 hours. So poor Al, when he and I both sought bail and to get out to prepare for trial, the judge wouldn't let Al out of jail. And the reason was because he proved that he was a flight risk. He fled from the very arrest that day. So he was kept in jail all the way up to and including his trial. So, trial preparation is hard enough. But if you're in jail with a pencil and a piece of paper, if you're lucky, and having to try to meet with your attorneys, and it's just a nightmare. So that really showed in Al's trial, just impossible to prepare, impossible to call witnesses, etc. So Al was convicted of all the charges. My trial is
except one charge. He was one charge. He was acquitted. Remember, Joe? Conspiracy charge.
Well, that's true. Actually, Al was acquitted of the conspiracy charge with me.
Yeah, so, that's right.
Incredible. Which, of course, neither of us were guilty of anything. But again, I made sure I had time to prepare. He did not have that opportunity. But you are correct. We were both acquitted of the conspiracy charge, and that was the worst of the charges. So anyway, my trial happened in June of 2005. So basically 7 months after I was indicted was my trial. And it was in Sacramento, California, because you were there. You watched every bit of it. You took notes. We're talking about 2005, right? So the internet was up and running, but it wasn't like it is today with social media and everything. So thanks to Paymon, there was a court reporter right there in the court giving the play-by-play of what was happening. That play-by-play is probably still on the internet somewhere, don't you think?
I'll have to look for it. Good point. Yes, probably.
So anyway, the trial occurred, I think it was a little over a week long. Of course, I guess every defendant thinks they're innocent, but I was clearly innocent. I shouldn't have even been charged in the first place. It was all legitimate seeking of a refund, as is a person's right. And the jury, there was a videotape, of a presentation that I had done at Al Thompson's business up in Redding, California. His business made very well-made flight bags, American-made flight bags that pilots or travelers could use, and it was a thriving business. But he, I'm trying to think how to not get caught up in too much too much detail. Anyway, the jury was mostly government workers, and of course it's Sacramento, the capital of California, and your jury pool is going to be made up of a lot of government workers. So that was something that concerned us. Bob Bernhoft, one half of my defense attorney team, the prosecution tried to kick him off of my defense team, claiming that it was for my best interest to get rid of Bob Bernhoft. So wasn't that nice of the government to try to get rid of half of my defense team? That didn't work, thankfully. That was even before the trial started. Over the weekend, the government filed a motion to try to get Bob Bernhoft kicked off my defense team. But that thankfully was not successful. So anyway, the conspiracy charge, interestingly enough, because my attorneys were confident that I had never engaged in any conspiracy to break any law, my attorneys point blank asked the witnesses, "Did you encounter, gather any evidence of a Mr. Banister engaging in conspiratorial conduct?" And they said no. And the jury's kind of scratching their heads like, well, if you're charging this guy with conspiracy, shouldn't you be testifying to a bunch of conspiracy evidence? And none could come up with any. And then as far as these 3 tax returns that the government claimed were fraudulent, again, my defense attorneys could see that the information that I put on the tax returns was completely logical, valid. It was word for word recasting of what was, the actual wording of the regulations and the statutes and the court cases. And so everything was completely legitimate, accurate, correct, and certainly true, not fraudulent. So the expert witness was like a 30-year IRS agent, was their prosecution expert witness. And he was asked, page by page of the tax returns, paragraph by paragraph, section by section, is there anything false in this section too? Anything false in section 6? Anything false on page 3? No, 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 no. So then the jury's like, well, okay, you tell us that these returns are false, fraudulent, but you can't point out a single character, word, sentence, paragraph, section that's false or fraudulent. So, the average person is going to say, well, wait a second, they indicted you on 4 felony counts, but in the trial, they can't point to any evidence of fraud, any evidence of, false statements, any evidence of conspiracy. But that's how it went. So the jury, when it finally came to jury deliberations, I know what I was going to say. It was about this videotape. So contrary to what the typical advice is, that you shouldn't talk to government agents, Al Thompson, who, to his credit, had nothing to hide or he wanted to be completely open with the investigating special agents. And so Al actually gave them a copy of a speech that I gave to Al Thompson's workers at his business. And so the government, the IRS and the DOJ were so desperate to try to find something that I did that was, wrong or that would paint me as a bad guy to the jury, that the government actually used that videotape as Exhibit A, like smoking gun. Look, here's Banister in the act, talking to the employees and telling them why he believes the income tax, is a scam, that it's, fraudulently enforced. And the jury didn't see that way at all. They saw me being very sincere and explaining to Al Thompson's workforce that, I found that the income tax laws were enforced, outside of the parameters of what the laws actually said in the books, and that I showed, the workers a bunch of illustrations. I mean, we're talking about, slideshow kind of a thing, like 90s technology, but nevertheless showed them evidence of why I believed what I believed. And yet the government was so desperate in the trial to show this videotape as their smoking gun that, look, here's Banister caught in the act, explaining this, why he breaks the law, etc. The jury didn't see it that way. The jury even wanted to see the videotape a second time. So the jurors weren't allowed to watch the videotape in the jury deliberation room. Everyone was brought back into the courtroom and sat through this very long, I think it's like an hour and a half or more, videotape, once again in the courtroom. So then the jury went back to the deliberation room, and there was one juror who, I don't know if I think I heard maybe you're going to show a videotape.
Yes. The two
One
of
of
them.
the jurors,
Right.
he worked for the Department of Energy, and he told me after the trial, he said, Joe, you referenced certain federal regulations in those amended tax returns that you prepared. And I thought that was interesting because in my job at the Department of Energy, if we had an issue to resolve, we would go to the federal regulations to see what the law actually required. And so when I, Mr. Juror, saw that you, Joe, did that on the tax returns, I thought, well, if he quoted those regulations accurately, then that shows that he was sincere. He wasn't breaking any laws. So that juror asked for the judge to see a copy of the regulations that I quoted in the tax returns, and the judge refused to let him see the regulation. So that made the juror even more suspicious. So long and short of it is, when the deliberations, I think, were several days.
So one very important thing, you never testified, remember?
Right. The night before, of course, it's pretty typical that when you're put on trial, you testify on behalf of yourself, because there's really no other way to communicate your sincerity and that you're not breaking any laws, and that you truly did your homework, and you find that the IRS is lying to the public, and so you adjust your conduct accordingly. And so, but Jeff Dickstein and Bob Bernhoff the night before, and I'm like thinking I'm not going to get any sleep at all because I have to prepare, because I'm going to go on the witness stand the next day. And we go out for dinner, and the attorneys are having drinks, and they're just having a great old time. And I'm thinking, why are you guys so happy and carefree? I'm going to be on the witness stand being, cooked, barbecued tomorrow. And that's when they broke the news to me that they said, well, we don't think you should testify, because now we've seen the government's entire case, and they don't have a case. It's a ridiculous, we shouldn't be here, but we're here. But the government had no case. So we're not going to
indicted a ham sandwich. Is that right, Joe? Basically, the government did the famous thing. They indicted a ham sandwich, which by definition cannot commit a crime. And they got it to trial jury. And so the indictment by itself means nothing. It's an accusation. It's a jury conviction that matters. Please go on, Joe. Huh?
Very true. Very true. And I think you remind me, I think I should get some shirts to sell that say, I am a ham sandwich, or Joe is a ham sandwich, because I did get indicted for no good reason. I even found out later, just as an aside, that the special agent who investigated me, who I used to work with when I was, working at the IRS, he actually recommended that I not be prosecuted, because he spent 3 years looking at my conduct and couldn't find any evidence of wrongdoing. But the DOJ, saw it in the IRS as an agency, decided to indict me anyway. So nothing but, dirty tricks. So anyway, the jurors told me, by the way, I'll just go right to the end of the story. I was acquitted of all 4 charges, as I deserved to be. And the jurors told me afterwards that never did a single juror have to be, brought over to the not guilty side. There were some that were undecided, but only because they were kind of confused about, what went on, and maybe not paying attention as well as some of the other jurors. And so, in other words, the government's case was so poor that there weren't even not one of 12 that, said, oh, this guy's guilty. So a few of them just had to be explained a little in more detail, the evidence, and shown the evidence. And, at the end of the day, I was acquitted by that jury. And in fact, the other juror that's on the video was I think he was the president of De Anza College. It's a community college in Cupertino, like where San Jose, South Bay Area is. And he was actually a card-carrying member of the ACLU. So, I mean, government worker, ACLU guy, you'd think like, oh, he'd convict Joe in a heartbeat. But he was actually very, very instrumental in paying close attention, to what the government was up to. And he could basically see that I was being railroaded, or at least the government was trying to railroad me. And so he was one of the 12 that gladly acquitted me of the ridiculous charges.
In fact, let's put those on the screen if you can do that. There, by the way, everybody, you can see it all, these documentation at Joe Banister's website. Joe, you want to give him your website while we get the documents up?
Yeah, Agent for Truth, FOR, agentfortruth.com. And if you scroll down on the landing page, it'll say, what did Joe find? And you'll see, the interview with the jurors and the indictment, the acquittal, the basic pieces of the biography.
This is the indictment on the left side of this page on agentfortruth.com. And here, everybody, is the actual indictment. You see, let's go a closer look. It says, here we are, in the United States District Court for the Eastern District of California. It's filed in November 21, 2024, looks like. And United States of America plaintiff versus Joseph Banister. Violations, multiple charges, defendant. Here's the indictment in more detail. And then here is the, let's see, here we go. Here's the acquittal form. Just zoom in on this acquittal form. See again, and you see the United States District Court, Eastern District of California, verdict form. And in this case, you see, we, the jury, find the defendant, Joseph Banister, as follows. As to count one of the indictment, a violation of Title 18 U.S.C. Section 371, not guilty. Below that, we got to go to the next page. It's on the next page, and a violation of Title 26 U.S.C. Section 72062, not guilty. Okay, that's willfully aiding, assisting, counseling, procuring, and filing an amended income tax return which was false with regard to material matter. Okay, same thing that they get for each tax return, not guilty. Okay, they charge this thing. Folks, realize that any tax preparer, okay, any tax assistant, if you're an accountant, okay, if you're a CPA, let me tell you, folks, you could be charged with this crime so easily because you make a mistake on the tax return that you prepared for somebody, okay, and they could show that you made a difference in taxes. They could charge you with the same stuff, okay? Willfully aiding, assisting, counseling, procuring the filing of an amended income tax return which was false with regard to material matter. Well, they say it's all material matter because the tax amount is different. So these forms that you and your accountant file under oath, it could get you and your accountant both in trouble because now they say, in addition, it's a conspiracy by the two of you, you and your CPA, your accountant, your tax attorney, to rip off the U.S. government. It's a very easy charge to come up with, but they used it against Joe, and it simply did not work because Joe did nothing wrong. So here it is, all these charges. Now we're going to play Joe. The jurors, these are the two jurors, everybody you see, outside the courtroom. Several friends of mine and myself were there talking to them, of these two jurors. We're going to play that right now. Some clips. This is available, the whole thing on YouTube. It's not that long, but we took even the best parts, the clips, to play it for you. So should I play it? You're going to play it. I played. Okay, here we go. Let's see what they say in these most interesting, relevant parts.
What was relevant on the conspiracy charge was that it was obvious to us that Mr. Banister had spent a lot of time investigating this subject and that he firmly believed in the subject matter that was what we had to consider in the trial. We shouldn't condemn a man for what he believes in. And we didn't find anything dishonest or deceitful than any of the other charges that were brought before us in this trial. He was innocent.
Yeah, I turned it off.
I think I'd be redundant to go ahead and just repeat what Bruce has just said, but the whole focus with me was whether indeed you believed in what you were doing. And from the very, very beginning, as I listened to the judge's instructions and instructed the idea of whether there was a belief, and I said to myself, well, if a person really believes in something, should he or she be thrown into jail? And I just don't agree with that kind of thing, and I don't think we do that in our country. And with that kind of thing, I think the whole focus was your credibility, your belief in what you're doing. Had you not believed in what you were doing, it would have been different.
Okay. All right, and then we go to part two of this interview of the jurors. Here was the second part.
Well, frankly, there was no evidence really. I looked at the case and I asked myself, what the hell's going on here? There's no case.
There's no case. Yep, there's no case to begin with. And here's part three.
We didn't see any reason to penalize Mr. Banister for speaking freely about any subject he wants to speak about, period.
I second that. I certainly hope I don't ever lose my right to speak.
With people like you doing what you did, you won't.
Absolutely. That's
Yes.
why you guys are. It means so much to us because people know the right thing to do, and
They don't do it.
And you guys did.
Well,
a lot of us have a lot to lose because
we're not heroes. We just didn't see the evidence just was not there to bring a conviction. The state did not have evidence, didn't have a case.
We went to great effort to follow the judge's instructions explicitly and read them over and over and over again to make sure we were doing the right thing.
So as you see, the government, when they indicted the ham sandwich Joseph Banister, is shot back in their face. And New York Times had a very short clip about it. Oh, tax protesters celebrate, or something like that, because they could not nail Joe. We're going to put that document in the video when we edit it, because I think we have that, Joe. Anyhow, so, all right, Joe, so then what happened after the acquittal? Anything more you want to add to it about your acquittal, and then leading up to 2010 events that you're going to tell us about? Anything you wanted to talk about this trial? Anything interesting, perhaps?
Well, as I mentioned, you were there, witnessing and then passing on to the public what was going on. So you were seeing the railroad, in person, seeing what the government is willing to do to, indict somebody. Oh, excuse me. Indict somebody and put me through that. When the jury's like, "Where's the case?" I mean, that's what investigations are for, right? If you investigate and you find there's no crime, you move on to something else. So it was just so apparent to the jury, and so it would have been, obviously you witnessed it too. You saw every moment of the trial. But one thing that, many things I won't forget. But I mean, you and all the people that were there in that video is very brings back some emotion of what that day was like. But I remember going back to the hotel and having a $30,000 hotel bill. And, I'm the defendant, so I'm the one that has to arrange for everything. And then I'm the one that has to pay the bill. And you, without telling me ahead of time, you paid that bill for me. And, just you being there was fantastic. But then you put icing on the cake when I'm like, how am I going to pay this $30,000 hotel bill? Because we were there for maybe a week in advance, and their attorneys and copy fees and meals. And, we probably had to get 6 or 8 hotel rooms for all the documents. And, the money adds up fast. And we're talking about $2,005 was $30,000. But you paid the bill. And I'm telling you, that really helped, because, if my wife had seen that bill and I was like, we have to start figuring out a way to pay it, man, I think I would have been in the doghouse for sure. So anyway, but so So the 2010 story.
Well, before I add that, let me tell you something interesting, guys, about this case. Usually, the jury came back pretty quickly, within like 2 hours, approximately. The jurors were back. And normally when the jurors come back quickly, it's because it is so obvious that the defendant is guilty. No one needs to really see much more proof. It was also obvious. They come back and say guilty, guilty, guilty. And in this case, it took them a very short time. And we thought, interesting. We felt, I knew it was going to be not guilty because I knew Joe had done nothing wrong. In fact, the night Joe was indicted, I remember it was midnight. I heard about it. I said to myself, this is going to shoot back in the IRS's face because I know Joe had done nothing wrong. There's no way they can get him. These guys are being overly aggressive and it's going to hurt the IRS back. And it did. But here's the interesting thing. When the judge came and called the jury in to read their verdict, the prosecutor was not there. His assistant was there, but he wasn't there. Why would the prosecutor not be there to hear potentially the guilty victory that he's trying to get, that he worked for, that he might get? And unfortunately, if you think about it logically, the only logical way he could have known that, because there's a jury secrecy. No one's supposed to talk to jurors. No one. It's against the law. The jurors are left alone. No one's talked to them. With the sheriff or marshal outside the door, making sure nobody goes in. If they have questions, they write a note to the judge, which the judge goes over with both parties. There's no in and out with the jury. So obviously, that jury privacy was broken somehow. And that's how crooked they are. They break the rules because who's going to tell them, well, you broke the rules. They're the prosecutors themselves who's going to prosecute the prosecutors. So anyhow, that's what happened. Doesn't matter. Joe won without testifying. And yes, New York Times. And then they were very disappointed that, Joe was not, put in jail and shut up. But Joe, tell us what happened in 2010.
So about 5 years after I was acquitted, I start hearing from, various people in my circle of, my network, that people are getting grand jury subpoenas. And so I did a FOIA, a Freedom of Information Act request, to find out what was going on. And by the time the response came back, I found out that from July of 2010, can't remember now, was it then until early 2011, that there was a second criminal investigation targeting me during that time period. The latter half of 2010 and early 2011. And again, I think you have some of the documents, but there's quite a few redactions in the documents, but I don't know if you want to actually pull it up. And
here it is. This is the document Joe's referring to. This says Criminal Investigation Division. Okay. And report run date 11/08/2012.
Okay, I'm seeing your file directories. I'm not seeing a document.
Oh, you don't see that? Okay, well, I'll go over it for the audience, Joe. It says begin month year July 2010, end month year October 2012. Investigation Banister Joseph R. So that's the document, starts with that. And then on the right-hand side of it, you can see we highlighted the total hours invested on checking out Joe. On the left is a month and year. On the left, you see 2010 months and 2011 months. And all of these hours on the right, which highlighted, they add up to over 1,100 hours, folks. That means in basically about 28 weeks, about half of a year, over half a year, full-time, somebody is investigating Joe, trying to find some dirt on Joe Banister to put him somehow, hopefully, in prison. That's what they were hoping. But as you can see here in this the document, an allegation, it says approve or reject decision information, and decision was made in September 27, 2011. SAE approved, discontinued SCI. Here's what those lingo means. Okay, SAC is special agent in charge, the special agent of the criminal division in charge, and he approved and discontinued. SCI is subject criminal investigation. Approved, discontinuing, going after the subject of the criminal investigation, which is Joe Banister. So that's what this document shows. And they were after him. Look at this. All these tax periods, 2 years right here. Under investigation, U.S. individual income tax return. The year is whited out. You cannot see it. Here's under 3 more years on there that they have looking at him. So
a total of 5.
Total of 5 altogether. So let's bring Joe back on, guys, okay? So, yeah, this shows that they, after about, under 2 years of trying to get Joe, they figured, nah, we have nothing and we don't want to lose again, so they left him alone. Go ahead, Joe. Anything you want to add to that?
I, give a little bit of a pucker factor when you're like, oh, I got to go through this all over again. But, I can only have conjecture and theories as to why. I mean, as you pointed out, hundreds and hundreds of hours. I mean, they really put a lot of hours in it. And the acronym SCI, Subject Criminal Investigation, the nuance about that term is that if there's an SCI opened on someone, then that is a formal, rubber meets the road criminal investigation that they intend to take to indictment, trial, conviction, sentence. I mean, they don't, when they open an SCI, they're going to take that all the way. So another kind of investigation is called a, now I'm I lost the term, a primary. A primary investigation is where you're just spending time at something, but you're not making any public contacts, and you still need to put your time somewhere because they there is an accountability for the agents in terms of what they do with their time that they get paid for. But a primary investigation is where you're not seeking someone's indictment, but you're kind of out there beating the bushes and looking for leads and looking for crimes, but not against one particular person. But an SCI, a subject criminal investigation, means that they formally, got permission to do a grand jury investigation, and once again take me to trial, try to get a conviction, and try to put me in prison. So it was the full-blown criminal investigation all over again, and then after about 7 months. And all those hours, they terminated it. So quite unusual in my experience.
And then, Joe, you and I did the Slave Nation documentary just under 2 years ago, which many of our audience members have not seen. But we're going to put a link to Slave Nation. You see Joe and myself, our story. It goes over more detail. We, provide that for you to see. Joe, anything you want to add for audience members about your story that you care to share?
Not really. Just really grateful for all the. It's been 20 years since that trial, and 26 years since I left the IRS. So I'm kind of, both of us had darker hair then, didn't we, Paymon?
Yes.
But anyway, I'm just grateful for all those years. There were people, not only yourself that helped out with my expenses, but people from all over the country and even some different parts of the world sent, $5, $10, $25 to help me defend myself and, successfully. And so I've got just boundless gratitude for all the Americans that, paid attention, kept an eye on how they were beating me up and stood in my corner. And I'm never be able to thank everyone, but I'm trying to thank you now that I'm very grateful for it. My family's grateful for it, and it's really nice to have other brave, caring, Americans, patriotic Americans who just want to keep their country free, just want the Constitution to be obeyed, and just want their government to obey the law as we citizens are expected to.
I want to add, by the way, Joe, to everybody that we had annual freedom rallies, Freedom Law School, from 1999 forward. And when Joe was indicted, I was able to do fundraising for him at these events. So this wasn't my money, although I did contribute some money myself as well. But our supporters, people that believed in our cause, like you, they contributed to Joe's legal defense because they knew his defense and his win is everybody else's win. And so the one more interesting thing about that, Joe, is that we're doing the same thing right now. We're getting together, everybody, to restore freedom in America. And that's what it's all about. If we join hands together to restore freedom, it can and it does work. We cannot be individuals by ourselves getting lost out there. Let's contribute and work together because one for all for one really does work. This is America's founding fathers did. Myself and other leaders in the freedom movement, we wanted to be part of Joe's defense. We want to be part of his victory because his victory would have been a victory for all of us. So it's exciting at this time that we're doing this. And let me ask you something else, Joe. How many years has it been since you last filed and paid income taxes?
1998 was the last tax return.
Over 25 years. And now it doesn't come after Joe for the criminal so-called charge of willful failure to file a tax return or tax evasion because Joe has done his homework. Joe has a record to tell a jury why he stopped filing income tax, how the corrupts and criminals are not him, but those IRS and DOJ lawyers who deliberately want to silence our free speech to keep the robbery of the American people going. And that's why the petitions we have on our website are so important for you to do at freedomlawschool.org. Those petitions are a record of you asking sincere questions with a law quoted attached for you to send to your congressman. If I'm wrong about this, show me. I will pay my fair share of taxes. But if I'm right, you ought to talk to your other Congress members and put a stop to the deep state renegades to rob and enslave the American people. So it's free at freedomlawschool.org. You all ought to do it. It's your right. I believe it's your duty as an American to do your part to have America be free. So with that, Joe, I want to thank you, my friend, for being once again. I'll have Joe back from time to time. I'll have him back, of course, coming up next year, because many people still haven't heard about Joe Banister over the last 15 years or so. We're going to bring him, let people know there are good people in the government, like Joe, who want to come out, want the truth also. He's not the only one, and we celebrate them and thank him, Joe. Thank you, Joe, for your courageous, consistent perseverance to stand for truth and freedom in spite of all the criminal and relentless attacks which criminals in deep state have done on you and your family to try to shut you down. Thank you for your support, my friend. Thanks for being my friend and helping me with all this cause that we're both working together with, Joe.
Thanks, Paymal. Thanks for being in my corner. Thanks to all your audience, and God bless everyone.
Well, thank you. Can we have Joe on the call answering people's questions also, or just myself this time? What's that? Okay, so Joe has to go, guys. He has another call coming up shortly. So thank you, Joe, for being my friend. We'll be in touch, Joe.
Thank you. Take care.
Mm-hmm.